Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life is Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Kumu. He offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within the communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. And his tour spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets and selected historical houses within each community. And in today's episode, we will be discussing the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary. So, where did the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary serve in Holyoke?
They served at two different locations. When you hire an order of nuns, usually you have a convent for them, you have a job for them, and that was in Holyoke at two different places. And I'll tell you where they did their work, where they lived, called the convent, where the mother house might have been, and there are some things I don't know about these nuns, but they have a great webpage. One thing I'd love to learn is where are they being buried? They're not being buried around the Holyoke area, so I want to learn that at some point. So they served in two different locations. First location was Perpetual Help School, which was on the border of Prospect Park, or what is now Pulaski Park. Its footprint was exactly the same footprint as the Mater Della Rosa School is now. It was a 4-story building there, a gorgeous look to it, and both the convent and the school were in the same building. I believe the way it went was the school was on floor 1, the convent was on floor 3, and then you had an auditorium on floor 2, so forth. And so that's one place they served. And when in 1922 they moved Perpetual Hope School and Church up to the block diagonally across from the Holy Public Library, the nuns moved with them, and the school moved with them. And so that was a new location, but they stayed with the group. And they stayed at that location still until, I think, in the 1970s, when it started getting such a low number of students that they started getting lay teachers only and not nun teachers. But I'm not positive. There might have been a few nuns left. Now, they also served at the Immaculate Conception School, and the first school for that was the former East White Street School. It was there for, about 15 years or so. And then they built a new school for them right on, right next to where the convent, the school, and the church and the rectory for the Immaculate Conception are still located. They're all still there. The school, rectory, and convent are the originals. The church has, as it is, third rendition, though. So that's where they worked, and that is wonderful because they were very strong into education, and they always were. They weren't like the Sisters of Providence, which were into social work, were also into being nurses in the hospitals, so forth. So these nuns were very much into education, and that was pretty much it.
And where were the convents for the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary?
The convent for the Perpetual Help was at the All Perpetual Help on the 3rd floor of that large building, where you had the church, the school, and the convent all together with a chapel. And that must have been unique because you were working right in the same building that you lived. And then 1922, that was from 1891 onwards, but 1922 they moved up, and the convent was the only one of the 4 buildings not in a row. So if you were on Chestnut Street between Hampshire Street and Cabot Street and sweeping from left to right, you would have seen the rectory, the big church, the school, and then to see the convent, you would have to go behind the church. You'd actually have a better view or fronted on Elm Street. So they lived in a building there. Sadly, all four of those buildings plus three residential locations for citizens were all burned in 1998 in the biggest fire that Holyoke has ever seen. And so sadly, everything was destroyed. You could not see that convent anymore. Now, the convent for Immaculate Conception is still there. It's a beautiful convent. It is with a chapel to its, if you face into it, to its right side. And all they had to do was cross the street, and that was North Summer Street, and they were at their work, which was the Immaculate Conception School. Now, they worked there from 1903. I'm sorry, they worked at the East White Street School until the Immaculate Conception separate school was ready. But those ordered nuns worked at both. And then from that early day, 1903, until 1979, they were in that convent and in that school. Now, there's one little story. The name changed for the school from Immaculate Conception School to Mary Immaculate School in 1975. And what happened was that, 1971. And what happened was the nuns joined forces with the Sisters of St. Joseph, and the schools joined forces. And you had the lower grades at the Immaculate Conception School, taught mostly by the Sisters of Presentation of Mary, and 3 blocks away, the Holy Rosary School, taught by Sisters of St. Joseph, would run, and they were under the same name. That's because both schools were getting lower enrollment. And the nuns stayed with it, and even when that system went away because the Sisters of Presentation of Mary left, that Sister St. Joseph kept teaching in the Immaculate Conception. Now, the sisters finally, in 1979, left that arrangement, and they were gone from Holyoke.
Before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, where is the mother house for the sisters?
Well, they have a nice web page, so that would be great to learn. And I get the feeling that the mother house is in Bedford, Maine. Now, they have so many places around. I could be wrong. That might be for a different reason. But the way they write it up, I think that's what it is. And that quite possibly is where they're being buried. So someday I want to figure that out. Because these were my nuns for, I believe, about 6 years. I had the Sisters of St. Joseph for the next 7 years after that. But these were our first 6 years. I had these Sisters of Presentation of Mary. So I'd like to know where people are based, especially when I know some of them, and where they're being buried, where they had if they had a college they're associated with, if they had a rookie school for rookie nuns. I'd like to know these kind of things. Now, they have a good web page, so I'm still trying to fiddle around and figure out what is what.
And where can you learn more about these sisters?
If you go to my web page, my nun web page on the internet at holyokecanaltour.org, and you click on the Sisters Presentation of Mary, up will pop what I know about them. Also, at that link that you will click on, if you go around, it says external link. Click on that, and it brings you to their webpage, and you can read about their history. They started out in the year 1797, and thus they passed their 200th anniversary in the year 1997. And also, the founder of the Sisters of Presentation of Mary has been made a saint by the Vatican. All right, her name is Marie Riviere, and on November 21st, 1796, is the day, the feast of the Presentation of Mary in the temple. And she was made a saint because of all the things she did. It was started in France, and then it came to the United States. And you can read a lot more about their self-written history at their webpage. So thank you for listening to this about the nuns in Holyoke.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and your historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website,